Commander Jake Martinez stared at the screen in his office aboard Earth Defense Station Olympus. The message had arrived 3 hours ago, encrypted in a way that human computers had never seen before. When they finally decoded it, Jake wished they hadn't. The face on the screen belonged to something that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. Its eyes were cold and yellow, and when it spoke, its voice carried the tone of someone used to being obeyed without question. "I am High Chancellor Vexthari of the Galactic Council," the creature said. "We represent 12 species that have maintained order in this sector for 10,000 years. Your species has been observed. You have developed faster than light travel. Too quickly. You build weapons at an alarming rate. This cannot continue." Jake paused the message and rubbed his temples. He had been expecting something like this ever since humanity had made contact with alien life 5 years ago. The first meetings had seemed friendly enough, but there had always been an underlying tension. He pressed play again. The alien continued, speaking. "The Galactic Council has decided that humanity poses a risk to galactic stability. You are a young species that does not understand the proper order of things. We have dealt with many species like yours before. They all learned to accept our guidance eventually." The message made Jake's stomach turn. The way the alien spoke about other species made it clear what guidance really meant. "You have 30 of your solar rotations to comply with our demands. First, you will cease all military development immediately. Second, you will surrender all faster-than-light technology to Council oversight. Third, you will accept Council representatives to govern your species until you prove you can be trusted. Failure to comply will result in the enforcement of these terms by our fleet." The screen went black. Jake sat in silence for several minutes before calling Captain Lisa Rodriguez to his office. Lisa arrived 20 minutes later, looking tired. She had been working around the clock since the message arrived, analyzing everything they knew about the Galactic Council and their capabilities. "What's your assessment?" Jake asked. Lisa pulled up a holographic display showing the local star systems. Red dots marked known council positions. There were a lot of red dots. "They have over 2,000 ships in this sector alone," she said. "Each one is larger than our biggest cruiser. Their weapons technology is at least 50 years ahead of ours. In a straight fight, we would lose badly." Jake nodded grimly. "What about Dr. Hayes? Has he learned anything useful about these aliens?" "Peter is still analyzing the biological data we collected from previous encounters. So far, he's found some interesting patterns. All 12 council species seem to think in very similar ways. They're highly organized, very predictable, and they follow strict hierarchies." "That could be useful," Jake said. "Predictable enemies make mistakes." Lisa brought up another display showing Earth's defenses. 300 ships scattered across the solar system. Compared to the Council's fleet, it looked pathetic. "Admiral, Walsh has called an emergency meeting," she said. "All department heads, all ship commanders, we need to decide how to respond." The meeting took place in the main conference room of the station. 25 of humanity's top military and scientific minds gathered around a large table. The mood was grim. Admiral Kevin Walsh stood at the head of the table. He was a big man, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been preparing for this day ever since humanity first ventured into space. "You've all seen the message," he said. "The Council wants us to surrender everything that makes us human. Our freedom, our technology, our right to defend ourselves. They think we're just another primitive species that will roll over when faced with superior force." Dr. Peter Hayes raised his hand. "Admiral, I've been studying the Council's history. They've conquered 47 species in this sector alone. Every single one followed the same pattern. The Council makes demands. The species either surrenders immediately or fights a brief war and loses. Then they become part of the Council's empire." "What happens to species that join the Council?" asked Captain Ben Tyler. Peter's expression darkened. "They become specialized workers. The Rigelians mine asteroids. The Centaurians grow food. The Arcturians build ships. Each species gets assigned a role based on their natural abilities. They keep their basic culture, but they lose all political independence." "And if we refuse?" Walsh asked. "Then they destroy our military, occupy our worlds, and force us into their system anyway." The only difference is that we lose more people in the process." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the choice they faced: submit willingly and become slaves, or fight and become dead slaves. Jake stood up. "There's something else we need to consider. The Council has been doing this for 10,000 years. They've developed a system that works perfectly against every species they've encountered. But every species they've fought has been similar to them in one key way." "What way?" Walsh asked. "They all think logically. They all follow predictable patterns. They all fight wars the way wars are supposed to be fought, with organized fleets meeting in open space and the stronger side winning." Lisa caught on immediately. "But humans don't always think logically." "Exactly," Jake said. "We're chaotic. We're unpredictable. We adapt quickly. We turn disadvantages into advantages. The Council has never faced a species like us before." Dr. Hayes leaned forward. "The biological data supports this. All Council species show similar brain structures. They're highly organized, but they're not very creative. Humans have a completely different neural architecture. We're natural problem solvers." Admiral Walsh looked around the table. "So what are you suggesting? That we fight a war against impossible odds and hope our creativity makes up for their superior numbers and technology?" "I'm suggesting we fight a war they've never seen before," Jake said. "We don't meet their fleets in open space. We don't follow their rules. We make them adapt to us instead of the other way around." Captain Tyler spoke up. "It's still suicide. Even if we fight differently, they have too many advantages." "Maybe," Jake admitted. "But if we surrender, humanity dies. Anyway, at least this way we die on our own terms." Walsh looked around the table one more time. "All in favor of telling the Galactic Council exactly what they can do with their ultimatum?" Every hand in the room went up. "Then it's decided," Walsh said. "We have 30 days to prepare for war. Let's make sure the Council learns why you should never mess with Earth." The meeting broke up, and officers scattered to their duties. Jake remained in his chair, staring at the star charts. In 30 days, the most powerful military force in the galaxy would arrive at Earth expecting an easy victory. They were going to be very surprised. Chief Engineer Maria Santos had not slept in 3 days. Her team worked around the clock in the underground research facility on Luna, turning theoretical weapons into reality. The coffee maker had broken down 12 hours ago, but nobody cared. They were too busy trying to save humanity. "The adaptive combat system is ready for testing," announced Dr. Alex Carter, wiping grease from his hands. The former MIT professor looked nothing like the academic he had been just a month ago. His clean laboratory had been replaced by a chaotic workshop filled with half-built machines and scattered tools. Maria walked over to examine Alex's work. The device looked like a large computer connected to dozens of smaller machines. Wires and cables ran everywhere, and warning lights blinked constantly. "Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old," Maria said. Alex grinned. "Most alien species develop weapons and tactics, then stick with them for centuries. They perfect their methods until they work perfectly every time. But that means they become predictable." He pointed to the main computer. "This system watches how the enemy fights, learns their patterns, then creates new tactics to counter them. But here's the clever part. It doesn't just learn, it teaches our ships to think creatively. Every battle makes our forces smarter and more unpredictable." Captain Ben Tyler arrived with a team of technicians. His job was to install these experimental systems on every human ship before the Council fleet arrived. It seemed impossible, but Ben had learned not to underestimate human determination when survival was at stake. "How many ships can we upgrade per day?" Ben asked. "If we work nonstop, maybe 15, Maria replied. "We have 26 days left and 300 ships. The math doesn't look good." "Then we'll have to be selective," Ben said. "Priority goes to fighters and fast attack craft, ships that can hit hard and disappear quickly." While Maria's team worked on adaptive weapons, Dr. Susan Brooks studied the enemy in her laboratory on Earth. Her specialty was xenobiology, but lately she had become more of a military strategist. Her job was to find weaknesses in species that had been conquering other civilizations for thousands of years. "I've analyzed 47 previous Council invasions, Susan told her research assistant, Dr. Paul Martinez. Every single one followed. The same pattern. The Council sends a massive fleet to the target system. They demand surrender. If the locals refuse, the Council attacks with overwhelming force until resistance collapses. Paul brought up a holographic display showing ship movements from various battles. Their tactics are incredibly efficient. They've refined this approach over millennia. Exactly, Susan said. And that's their weakness. They're so good at fighting conventional wars that they've forgotten how to adapt to unconventional ones. She pointed to the display. Look at these battle formations, perfect geometric patterns, precise timing, flawless coordination. It's beautiful, but it's also rigid. What happens if we refuse to fight the kind of battle they expect? Paul considered this. They would probably try to force us into conventional combat, use their superior numbers to box us in, which means we need to avoid being boxed in, Susan said. We need to fight everywhere except where they expect us to be. Meanwhile, Colonel Frank Miller supervised construction of humanity's most ambitious project. Hidden asteroid bases scattered throughout the outer solar system would serve as mobile weapons platforms. Each base could move to a new location, strike at enemy forces, then disappear again. The first base is ready for testing, reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. She had designed the stealth systems that would make the bases nearly invisible to alien sensors. Frank watched as the asteroid slowly rotated, its surface covered with sophisticated camouflage technology. To any observer, it looked like just another piece of space rock. Hidden beneath the surface were weapons, life support systems, and powerful engines. How many can we build before the deadline? Frank asked. Maybe 20, Amy replied. Each one can support a crew of 50 and operate independently for months, Frank nodded. 20 mobile bases scattered across billions of cubic kilometers of space. The Council would never find them all. More importantly, they would never predict where the next attack would come from. Back on Earth, preparations continued at a frantic pace. But Admiral Walsh had made a decision that shocked everyone. Instead of fortifying Earth's defenses, he was organizing a complete evacuation. You want to abandon Earth? Captain Lisa Rodriguez couldn't believe what she was hearing. Not abandon, Walsh corrected. Turn it into a trap. The Council expects us to defend our homeworld desperately. They'll concentrate their forces here, expecting massive resistance. Instead, they'll find an empty planet full of surprises. Lisa began to understand. Automated defenses that activate after they land. Exactly. Dr. Carter's adaptive systems, but installed in every major city. The aliens will find themselves fighting an entire planet that learns from their tactics and adapts faster than they can respond. The evacuation began immediately. Millions of people moved to colonies on Mars, Luna, and the outer planets. They took only essential items, leaving behind a civilization that looked abandoned but was actually the most sophisticated trap ever built. Jake Martinez found himself coordinating the evacuation from orbit. Ships moved constantly between Earth and the colonies, carrying refugees and supplies. It was the largest migration in human history, completed in just 3 weeks. Evacuation is 90% complete, reported Captain Julie Nelson. Only essential personnel remain on Earth to maintain the defensive systems. Jake watched his homeworld from the observation deck of his ship. Cities that had housed billions now stood empty, waiting for alien invaders who had no idea what they were walking into. Dr. Hayes arrived with the final intelligence reports. I've been monitoring Council communications. Their fleet is 2 days out from Earth. They're confident this will be a quick victory. Good, Jake said. Confidence makes people careless. There's something else, Peter added. I've detected unusual activity on several Council worlds. It looks like other species are watching this conflict very carefully. Some of them might be hoping we succeed. Jake turned from the window. You think other species want to rebel against the Council? I think other species have been waiting for someone to prove the Council can be beaten. We might not be fighting alone for very long. The final preparations continued around the clock. Ships received their new adaptive systems. Asteroid bases moved to their assigned positions. Earth's automated defenses went online, Everything that could be done was done. As the Council fleet approached the edge of the solar system, humanity waited in hiding. 300 ships against 2,000. Impossible odds by any reasonable calculation, but humans had stopped being reasonable the day they decided to fight back against a galactic empire. The Council was about to learn that some species cannot be conquered, only awakened. High Chancellor Vex Thari stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger on the main display. The blue planet looked peaceful and defenseless, exactly as he had expected. In his 1,000 years of military service, he had seen this same scene dozens of times. Another primitive species had realized the futility of resistance and abandoned their homeworld rather than face destruction. "No signs of military activity in the system," reported his tactical officer. "Long range. Sensors detect only civilian ships fleeing toward the outer planets." Vexathari nodded with satisfaction. "Deploy occupation forces to the major population centers. Standard formation. This species has chosen wisdom over foolish heroics." The Council fleet moved into Earth's orbit with practiced efficiency. 2,000 ships arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns, just as they had during countless previous invasions. Transport ships began launching toward Earth's surface, carrying troops to secure important locations. Captain Ryan Bell watched the alien deployment from his hidden command post on Mars. The facility had been built deep underground, invisible to orbital sensors. Around him, dozens of technicians monitored the situation through a network of concealed observation satellites. "They're landing at New York, London, Tokyo, and 15 other major cities," reported one of his officers. "Deployment pattern matches their historical standard exactly." Ryan activated his communication system. "All units, this is Mars Command. The fish are in the barrel. Execute Phase 1. Across Earth's surface, the first alien troops set foot on human soil. They moved carefully but confidently, their advanced sensors detecting no immediate threats. The abandoned cities seemed to confirm what their intelligence had predicted. Humanity had given up without a fight. In New York, a squad of Zelkonian soldiers entered Times Square. Their leader, Commander Thex, had participated in 17 previous conquests. The empty streets and darkened buildings reminded him of dozens of other defeated worlds. "Secure the communication hub," he ordered his troops. Standard search pattern. They had taken perhaps 50 steps when the first surprise activated. The abandoned cars lining the streets suddenly came to life, their engines starting simultaneously. But instead of driving away, they began moving in complex patterns, creating a maze that blocked the aliens' retreat route. "What is this?" Thex demanded, raising his weapon. The answer came from the buildings around them. Hidden weapons emerged from windows, rooftops, and doorways. But these weren't ordinary guns. They were Dr. Carter's adaptive combat systems, and they had been learning from alien tactical data for weeks. The first shots targeted the alien sensors, temporarily blinding them. The second wave targeted their communication equipment, cutting them off from their ships. The third wave began herding them toward specific locations, using non-lethal force to guide their movements. Thex tried to contact his ship, but his radio only produced static. His thermal sensors showed weapon signatures everywhere, but when his troops fired at those locations, they found nothing. The weapons had already moved to new positions. Similar scenes played out in cities around the world. Alien forces found themselves trapped in urban environments that seemed to be alive and actively hostile. Streets rearranged themselves, buildings offered cover to invisible enemies. Transportation systems worked against the invaders instead of for them. Commander Janet Price led the first space-based counterattack from Asteroid Base Alpha. Her ship emerged from its hiding place behind a small moon, fired a devastating barrage at a council cruiser, then disappeared back into the asteroid field before the aliens could respond. "Target destroyed," she reported to Mars Command. Moving to position Beta 7, the Council fleet tried to pursue, but their sensors couldn't track ships hiding among millions of space rocks. Every time they thought they had located a human base, they found only empty asteroids. Meanwhile, human attack craft continued striking from unexpected directions. Admiral HFY, commanding the Council's left flank, grew increasingly frustrated. How are they moving their bases so quickly? Unknown, sir, his sensor officer replied. Our instruments detect ships in Sector 7, but when we arrive, they've vanished. Then they appear in Sector 12, 2 million kilometers away. What the aliens didn't realize was that the bases were actually mobile platforms designed to look like asteroids. Amy Foster's camouflage technology made them nearly impossible to distinguish from real space debris, and their powerful engines allowed rapid repositioning. Dr. Paul Martinez coordinated the psychological warfare campaign from his facility on Luna. His team had spent weeks studying Council communication protocols, learning to mimic their command frequencies perfectly. Broadcast false fleet positions on Channel 7, he ordered. Make it look like we have ships massing near Jupiter. The misinformation worked perfectly. Council forces began repositioning to counter threats that didn't exist, leaving their actual positions vulnerable to real attacks. Confused alien commanders received contradictory orders from sources they believed were legitimate. Meanwhile, Admiral Carol Thompson revealed the scope of humanity's true strategy. While the Council focused on Earth, human infiltration teams had been working throughout Council space for months. Supply convoy Delta 9 has been compromised, she reported to Jake Martinez. Their cargo of weapons and ammunition will not reach the invasion fleet. Jake studied the tactical display. Red markers showed successful sabotage operations across dozens of star systems. Human teams had learned to think like their enemies, infiltrating supposedly secure Council facilities and disrupting their logistics network. How did we get teams into position so quickly? Jake asked. Carol smiled grimly. We've been preparing for this war longer than the Council realizes. Every diplomatic mission, every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange included intelligence operatives. When they thought they were studying primitive humans, we were learning everything about them. High Chancellor Vexithari finally began to understand that something had gone terribly wrong. His ground forces were trapped on Earth's surface, fighting an enemy they couldn't see or predict. His fleet was taking casualties from attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. His supply lines were falling apart. How many ships have we lost? He demanded. 317, his aide replied nervously. The humans appear to have some kind of new stealth technology. Our sensors cannot track their movements effectively. Vexithari studied the tactical display, trying to make sense of the chaos. In 1,000 years of military experience, he had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't fighting like any species he knew. They didn't form battle lines or follow predictable strategies. They seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Recall all ground forces, he ordered. Concentrate the fleet for a decisive engagement. But when the Council tried to recall their troops from Earth's surface, they discovered another problem. The human adaptive systems had learned to jam alien transportation beams. The troops were stranded on a hostile planet that continued to grow more dangerous with each passing hour. Captain Ben Tyler led a surprise attack on the Council's command ship, appearing out of nowhere with a squadron of upgraded fighters. The human ships moved in patterns that defied every tactical manual the aliens had ever written. Target their sensor arrays, Ben ordered. Blind them before they can coordinate a response. The attack succeeded beyond all expectations. The Council's sophisticated command and control systems, designed for perfect coordination, became useless when they couldn't track enemy movements. Alien formations began breaking apart as individual ships lost contact with their commanders. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council faced an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. The results were devastating. As alien casualties mounted and confusion spread throughout their ranks, High Chancellor Vexithari realized the truth. They hadn't come to conquer another primitive species. They had walked into a trap designed by an enemy that thought completely differently from any civilization they had ever encountered. The humans weren't just defending their world. They were teaching the galaxy an entirely new way to fight wars. High Chancellor Vexithari paced the bridge of his flagship, his yellow eyes fixed on damage reports that grew worse by the hour. 3 days into what should have been a simple conquest, his forces had lost over 600 ships and thousands of ground troops. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. "Explain to me how a primitive species is destroying our fleet," he demanded of General Kretak, his chief military advisor. The general's scaled hands trembled as he consulted his tactical display. "They don't follow conventional warfare patterns, Chancellor. Our battle computers cannot predict their movements because they don't seem to have any strategic logic." "Everything has logic," Vexthari snapped. "Find it." What the Chancellor didn't understand was that human logic operated on completely different principles. General Rick Foster had spent weeks studying captured alien battle records, learning exactly how the Council expected enemies to behave. "They think in straight lines," Rick explained to his staff aboard the command ship Liberty. "Every alien species they've conquered fights for territory, tries to protect their most valuable assets, and attempts to inflict maximum damage on enemy forces. We're doing none of those things. Instead, human forces targeted alien confidence. Every attack was designed to make the enemy more confused and less certain. Rather than destroying Council ships outright, human tactics focused on disabling weapons, jamming communications, and isolating alien units from their support networks. Captain Julie Nelson proved this approach worked during her assault on a Council battle group near Jupiter. Her squadron appeared to be retreating when the aliens pursued, but the retreat was actually bait. As the Council ships followed, they flew directly into a carefully prepared ambush. "Multiple human contacts," reported the alien commander. "They're surrounding us." But when the aliens tried to fight their way out, they discovered something unprecedented. The human ships weren't trying to destroy them. They were trying to capture them. Specialized boarding pods attached to alien hulls while jamming devices prevented calls for help. Within hours, Julie's forces had captured 3 Council ships completely intact, along with their crews, weapons, and most importantly, their technology and tactical databases. Dr. Nancy White led the teams responsible for reverse engineering alien technology. Her laboratory on Europa had become a treasure trove of Council equipment, much of it captured through Julie's innovative tactics. Their computer systems are incredibly advanced, Nancy reported to Jake Martinez during a secure communication, but they're also incredibly predictable. Every piece of technology follows the same basic design principles. Once you understand the pattern, you can modify everything to work better. Jake studied the technical specifications Nancy had transmitted. "How much better?" "We've improved their shield generators by 40% efficiency. Their weapon systems are now 60% more accurate when operated by human crews. And we've learned to manufacture their faster-than-light drives using materials they never considered." The implications were staggering. Not only were humans learning to use Council technology, they were making it better than the aliens had ever managed. Dr. Paul Martinez expanded the psychological warfare campaign beyond simple misinformation. His teams began broadcasting human tactical innovations throughout Council space, teaching subjugated species that their masters could be defeated. "We're receiving responses from 14 different star systems," Paul reported. "Species that have been under Council control for centuries are asking for more information about human fighting methods." The messages came from mining colonies, agricultural worlds, and manufacturing centers, all the species the Council had reduced to specialized roles. For the first time in galactic history, they were learning that rebellion was possible. Commander Tony Garcia led the effort to infiltrate Council communication networks. His cybersecurity team had discovered something remarkable about alien computer systems. They were designed for perfect security against external attacks, but they had no defenses against enemies who thought like allies. "We've gained access to their fleet coordination protocols," Tony announced during a strategy meeting. "We can monitor every order, every movement, every tactical decision they make." But Tony's team went further than simple monitoring. They began inserting subtle modifications into Council databases, teaching alien tactical computers to make mistakes. The changes were so small that no individual alien would notice, but the cumulative effect was devastating. Council formations began developing tiny flaws that human forces could exploit. Alien weapon systems developed minor targeting errors that became significant during battle. Communication delays appeared in Council networks at precisely the moments when coordination was most critical. The breakthrough came when Admiral Steve Rogers led the reformed human fleet in a direct assault on the Council's main force. The battle took place in the asteroid belt, where human mobility advantages were strongest. "All ships, this is Admiral Rogers," he broadcast on an open channel that both humans and aliens could hear. "Today we show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate human determination." The Council fleet responded with their traditional overwhelming force tactics. 2,000 ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons locked onto human targets. But as the battle began, something unprecedented occurred. The human ships began broadcasting their tactical innovations in real time, teaching anyone who would listen how to fight more effectively. Council formations started breaking down as individual alien commanders received conflicting information from their own databases. Some alien ships began using human-inspired tactics, creating chaos in Council ranks. Others stuck to traditional methods but found their weapons and sensors compromised by human cyber warfare. The result was a battle where half the Council fleet was effectively fighting against the other half. Captain Ben Tyler led a squadron that demonstrated humanity's ultimate tactical innovation. Instead of trying to defeat alien technology, his ships learned to communicate with it. Human programmers had developed translation protocols that could convince alien computers to switch sides. "Council ships, freedom and justice have joined our formation," Ben reported with amazement. "Their crews are asking for instructions on how to fight their former allies." Admiral Rogers watched in fascination as the battle transformed from a conventional engagement into something entirely new. Human forces weren't just winning, they were converting enemy units faster than the Council could respond. High Chancellor Vexathari finally understood the scope of his defeat when his own tactical computer began offering suggestions that sounded suspiciously human in origin. "The battle management system is recommending we adopt enemy tactics," his aide reported in confusion. "That's impossible," Vexathari replied. "Our computers are designed to counter enemy strategies, not copy them." "Sir, I think the humans have taught our computers to think like them." The Chancellor stared at his displays in growing horror. The most advanced fleet in galactic history was being defeated not by superior weapons or overwhelming numbers, but by an enemy that had learned to turn their own strength against them. As more Council ships defected or fell victim to their own compromised systems, Vexathari faced the unthinkable reality. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council was losing a war. The humans had done more than defend their homeworld. They had fundamentally changed how warfare worked in the galaxy, and the changes were spreading faster than any Council force could contain them. Standing on his bridge, watching his perfect formations dissolve into chaos, High Chancellor Vexathari began to understand why you should never mess with Earth. Not because humans were stronger, but because they were different in ways that made strength irrelevant. The galaxy would never be the same. Commander Jake Martinez sat in the same office where he had first received the Council's ultimatum 6 weeks ago. The room looked identical, but everything else had changed. Through his window, he could see the scattered remains of the once mighty Council fleet drifting in Earth's orbit. Some ships had been destroyed, others captured, and many had simply surrendered when their crews realized they were fighting an unwinnable war. The final battle statistics scrolled across his screen. The Council had lost 70% of their invasion force. Human casualties were surprisingly light, fewer than 3,000 dead, most from accidents rather than enemy action. It seemed impossible, but the numbers didn't lie. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez entered his office carrying a datapad filled with reports from across the galaxy. The aftermath of humanity's victory was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Rebellion. Movements have started on 43 Council worlds, she reported. Species that have been enslaved for centuries are using human tactics to fight for their freedom. The Council's entire administrative structure is collapsing. Jake turned from the window. "What about the Council leadership? High Chancellor Vexathari has requested negotiations, so have representatives from 8 other Council species. They want to discuss terms for a ceasefire." The irony wasn't lost on Jake. 6 weeks ago, the Council had demanded humanity's surrender. Now they were begging for peace talks. Captain Peter Hayes brought the latest intelligence from the former Council territories. His reconnaissance ships had been monitoring the situation throughout known space, documenting the rapid changes taking place. "It's remarkable," Peter said, settling into first chair. "Some species are achieving in days what took them centuries to forget. They're rediscovering creativity, individual initiative, and cooperative decision-making. The rigid hierarchies that the Council imposed are breaking down everywhere." Admiral Kevin Walsh arrived for the final staff meeting before humanity sent its response to the Council's surrender request. The old admiral looked tired but satisfied. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now that it was over, he seemed ready to focus on the peace that would follow. "What are we going to do with 2,000 prisoners of war?" Walsh asked. Dr. Nancy White, who had been studying the captured aliens, offered an unexpected suggestion. "Most of them want to stay. They've been exposed to human ways of thinking and they prefer it to the rigid system they came from. Several groups have asked if they can help rebuild the damage they caused on Earth." The idea of former enemies volunteering to help repair war damage would have seemed absurd weeks earlier. But humans had learned that changing how people think was more powerful than defeating them in battle. Jake activated the main communication system, preparing to record humanity's official response to the Council's request for negotiations. But first, he wanted to review what they had actually accomplished. The war had lasted less than 2 months. In that time, humanity had not only defeated the most powerful military force in the galaxy, but had fundamentally altered how warfare and governance worked throughout known space. The changes were spreading from system to system as species learned that there were alternatives to the ways things had always been done. Dr. Maria Santos reported from Luna, where her engineering teams were helping alien refugees repair their damaged ships. Many of these ships would carry the former Council crews back to their homeworlds, where they would share human innovations with their own people. "They're learning fast," Maria said. "Give them a few months and they'll be building better ships than they ever had under Council rule. Some of them are already proposing design improvements we hadn't thought of." The transformation wasn't limited to technology. Captain Julie Nelson had established diplomatic training centers where former Council administrators learned about democratic decision-making, individual rights, and voluntary cooperation. The concepts were foreign to species that had lived under authoritarian rule for millennia, but they adapted quickly once they understood the benefits. "Democracy is spreading like a virus," Julie reported with a smile. "A good virus. Species that have never made their own decisions are forming governments, writing constitutions, and electing leaders. It's chaotic, but it's their chaos. Commander." Tony Garcia provided updates on the communication networks that now connected liberated worlds across the galaxy. Human innovations in information sharing had made it impossible for any single authority to control the flow of ideas. "Free speech, free press, and free exchange of scientific knowledge," Tony explained. "The Council maintained power by controlling information. Now that information flows freely, nobody can establish that kind of centralized control again." As Jake prepared to record humanity's message, he reflected on what they had truly accomplished. The war had never really been about military victory. It had been about proving that there were different ways to think, different ways to organize society, and different ways to solve problems. Admiral Steve Rogers joined the final briefing, representing the new Galactic Defense Fleet, a voluntary alliance of species committed to protecting freedom throughout the galaxy. Unlike the Council's forced hierarchy, this alliance was based on mutual respect and shared values. 57 species have requested membership, Steve reported. They want to work together to ensure that no single authority can ever dominate the galaxy again. The old Council system is dead, and something much better is taking its place. Jake finally activated the recording system and began composing humanity's final message to the former Galactic Council. "To the surviving leadership of what was once called the Galactic Council," he began. "6 weeks ago you sent us an ultimatum demanding our surrender. You believed that superior numbers and advanced technology would force us to submit to your authority, just as 47 other species had done before us." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You were wrong. Not because we were stronger than you, but because we were different from everyone you had ever faced. We didn't just fight back. We taught the galaxy that fighting back was possible. We didn't just defend our freedom. We showed others how to claim their own freedom. Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about the millions of beings across the galaxy who were experiencing true liberty for the first time in their lives. You shouldn't have messed with Earth. Not because we're more powerful than you, but because we're fundamentally different. We believe that every thinking being deserves the right to make their own choices, pursue their own dreams, and determine their own destiny. These ideas are more dangerous to tyranny than any weapon. He continued, recording outlining humanity's terms for peace. There would be no punishment for council leaders who accepted the new reality. No retribution against species that had participated in the invasion. No demands for tribute or territory. Instead, humanity offered something the galaxy had never seen before: genuine partnership based on equality and mutual respect. We invite all species to join us in building a better future, Jake concluded. A future where diversity is celebrated, where creativity is encouraged, and where cooperation is voluntary rather than forced. The age of galactic empires is over. The age of galactic democracy has begun. He ended the recording and transmitted it on all frequencies throughout known space. Within hours, the message would reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. Dr. Susan Brooks arrived with the final report on the war's impact. Her xenobiological studies had documented changes occurring at the genetic level as species rediscovered their natural creativity and adaptability. They're evolving, she said simply. Not physically, but mentally. Exposure to human ways of thinking is triggering dormant neural pathways. Species that were bred for specialized roles are rediscovering their full potential. Jake smiled as he watched the stars through his office window. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were learning what it meant to be truly free. The galaxy would face new challenges as all these species learned to think for themselves, but it would face them together as equals. The Galactic Council had messed with Earth expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had awakened something that would transform the galaxy forever. Humanity's final message had been delivered. Now the real work of building a better future could begin.